Welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing something a little different because instead of talking about the latest electric SUV or the newest twin-turbo sedan, we're going back in time to talk about a car that many people still consider the most beautiful automobile ever built. In this video, you're going to get a complete review and a full understanding of the 1961 Jaguar E-Type. We're covering everything that actually matters: the exterior design, the interior, the technology of its era, the performance, the driving experience, the practicality, the strengths, the weaknesses, the pricing, and how it truly stacks up against its biggest rivals. So, if you stay until the end, you're going to walk away with a complete picture of this car, and you'll understand exactly why it still turns heads more than 60 years after it first rolled out of Coventry. Picture this. It's March of 1961, and the automotive world is gathered at the Geneva Motor Show, expecting to see just another sports car. Instead, Jaguar pulls the cover off something that looks like it drove straight out of a dream. Journalists are stunned, competitors are worried, and somewhere in Italy, Enzo Ferrari reportedly calls it the most beautiful car ever made, a compliment that meant everything coming from the man who built some of the most gorgeous machines in history. That's the kind of entrance the E-Type made. It wasn't just another new model. It was a statement, a car that changed what people expected sports cars to look like, and in many ways, it never really stopped influencing design decades later. Let's start with the exterior, because honestly, this is where the E-Type does most of its talking. The long, sweeping bonnet almost feels disproportionate to the rest of the car, and that's exactly the point. It gives the whole silhouette this predatory, almost feline stance, which fits perfectly with the Jaguar badge sitting up front. The curves aren't just decoration either. They came from aerodynamic thinking borrowed from Jaguar's racing program, particularly the D-Type that had already proven itself at Le Mans. So when you look at the E-Type, you're not just looking at art for the sake of art. You're looking at function shaped so beautifully that it became art almost by accident. The covered headlights, the subtle hump on the hood, the way the rear haunches curve inward, all of it was designed to look fast, even when the car was standing perfectly still in a driveway. Step inside and the story shifts a bit. The cabin is snug, almost intimate, wrapping around the driver rather than simply seating them. The dashboard is covered in toggle switches and round analog gauges, the kind of layout that feels more like an aircraft cockpit than a modern car interior. There's no touchscreen, no digital display, none of the conveniences we take for granted today, and that's part of the charm. Every control has weight and mechanical honesty to it. The seats are low and firm, putting you almost eye level with the top of the steering wheel, which instantly changes how connected you feel to the road. Space is tight, especially for taller drivers, and this is very much a two-seater built for driving, not lounging. But that snugness creates intimacy, the sense that the car was built around a person rather than a committee of engineers trying to please everyone. Now, when we talk about technology in a car from 1961, we obviously aren't talking about lane-keeping assist or adaptive cruise control. There's no infotainment screen, no navigation system, no built-in safety sensors of any kind. What the E-Type offered instead was mechanical innovation that was ahead of its time. It used independent rear suspension, something almost unheard of in production. Safety, understandably, is where the E-Type shows its age the most. There are no airbags, no crumple zone engineering as we understand it today, and seatbelts, if fitted at all in early cars, were basic at best. This is a car that demands respect and awareness from the person behind the wheel because it offers very little protection if something goes wrong. It's an honest reminder of how far automotive safety has come, and it's one of the reasons collectors today treat these cars less like daily transportation and more like rolling pieces of history that deserve careful, respectful driving. Underneath that long hood sits a 3.8-litre inline six-cylinder engine producing around 265 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed manual gearbox. On paper, those numbers might not shock anyone raised on modern turbocharged engines, but context matters here. In 1961, this combination allowed the E-Type to hit 60 miles an hour in under 7 seconds and reach a top speed close to 150 miles per hour, numbers that were nothing short of sensational for a road car at the time. It wasn't just fast for its era, it was fast enough to genuinely worry established performance brands that had dominated the conversation for years. But numbers only tell part of the story. What really matters is how the E-Type feels from behind the wheel, and this is where it becomes something closer to an experience than a machine. The engine has this deep mechanical growl that builds with intention rather than aggression, pulling you forward smoothly instead of shoving you back into the seat. The steering is light yet communicative, letting you feel the texture of the road through your fingertips. Because you're sitting so low and the bonnet stretches out so far ahead of you, every drive feels like an event, almost theatrical in how it makes you aware of your speed and position on the road. It rewards a driver who understands rhythm and patience rather than someone looking for brute digital precision. When it comes to practicality, the E-Type was never trying to be sensible. There's minimal storage, a tight cabin, and it demands a certain level of mechanical sympathy, since these are now over 6 decades old and require careful maintenance to stay reliable. Owning one today isn't about commuting or grocery runs, it's about preserving a piece of design history and enjoying it on weekends, at car shows, or on quiet countryside roads where you can actually appreciate what it's doing. Parts availability has improved thanks to a dedicated global community of restorers and specialists, but ownership still requires patience, passion, and a willingness to get your hands dirty. If we're being fair and balanced here, the strengths of the E-Type are obvious. The design remains timeless. The performance was groundbreaking for its era, and the driving experience still feels special even by today's standards. But the weaknesses are just as real. The cramped cabin, the lack of modern safety features, the demanding maintenance, and the sheer rarity that makes finding a well-preserved example increasingly difficult all factor into the ownership equation. This isn't a car for someone who simply wants reliable transportation. It's a car for someone who wants a relationship with a machine that has genuine soul. Let's talk about pricing, because this is where things get interesting. When the E-Type launched in 1961, it was priced dramatically lower than rivals offering similar performance, which is part of why it caused such a stir. Today, however, the story has flipped entirely. Depending on condition, originality, and history, a genuine 1961 E-Type can sell anywhere from the low 6 figures for a project car all the way past several $100,000 for a pristine, fully documented example. It's no longer the affordable exotic it once was. It's now a blue-chip classic that continues to appreciate in value, which says a lot about how strongly it's regarded within the collector world. Back in its own time, the E-Type went head-to-head with cars like the Ferrari 250 GT and the Aston Martin DB4, both of which carried price tags far higher than Jaguar's offering, despite delivering comparable performance. There was also competition brewing from across the Atlantic with the Chevrolet Corvette, which offered raw power at an accessible price, but lacked the E-Type's refined European elegance. What made the E-Type so disruptive was that it offered performance and beauty that rivaled cars costing 2 or 3 times as much, essentially democratizing a level of automotive glamour that had previously been reserved for the wealthiest buyers. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, the impact of the 1961 E-Type goes far beyond specification sheets or lap times. It changed public perception of what a British sports car could be, it pressured competitors to rethink their pricing and design philosophy, and it became a cultural symbol of the swinging 60s, appearing in films, magazines, and celebrity garages around the world. It's the kind of car that doesn't just belong in automotive history, it belongs in cultural history, representing a moment when style, performance, and accessibility briefly aligned in a way that felt almost magical. So when we bring everything together, the 1961 Jaguar E-Type isn't just remembered as a fast car or a beautiful car, it's remembered as a turning point. It proved that elegance and performance didn't have to belong exclusively to the ultra-wealthy, and it created a blueprint for what a truly desirable sports car could look and feel like. More than 60 years later, it still manages to stop people in their tracks, and that kind of lasting emotional impact is something very few cars in automotive history can genuinely claim. If this deep dive gave you a real appreciation for what made the E-Type so special, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment letting us know which classic car you'd love to see us break down next. Your support genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories, and trust me, there are plenty more incredible machines from automotive history that deserve this same kind of attention. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.